stressful game. You playing it relaxed because you're just sitting back, you're enjoying the colors, you're enjoying the feel of the game and things like that, and you're enjoying the aesthetics. But it's stressful because you lose a lot, or like in my case, you lose all the time. But that art makes you feel okay because you're not stressing your eyes, you're not stressing yourself with all of the visuals. It's simply the gameplay, and that was a really, really good idea on their part of making the art as soft and as comfortable as possible, as easy for people to see without straining their eyes, so that they can focus just on the gameplay, which is addictive and quite difficult at times.
Thank you, Damir and Brad. Ok, câu hỏi tiếp theo nha. Thế nào là một level khó? Làm thế nào để định nghĩa được skill của người chơi giỏi và người chơi kém và tìm ra điểm cân bằng để phục vụ họ? James, do you want to take this question?
Okay, so I think the question was basically how we discover which players have high levels of skill and how we balance a game for both good players and bad players, right? And some of this is a natural progression curve. As you guys know, there's a lot of systems for self-balancing, like ELO systems in competitive games, where you won't be matched against higher, more difficult players, you'll be matched against someone of your own skill level. Very often, how we can discover a player's skill level is some of the stuff that we were talking about earlier, about making skill testing moments, and then giving players a way to sort of adjust the difficulty for themselves is always very valuable. But don't think about this as just putting in an easy mode. Instead, think about an RPG, right? In your role-playing game, if you're really, really good at the game, you can beat this boss at level 5 or whatever. But we give the player the option to grind and grind and grind, and now this other player who can't beat at level 5, they're not very good at the game, gets to level 10, gets good equipment, and now they too can beat the boss. So giving progression elements to the player that allows them to beat things at their own pace and sort of adjust the difficulty down by getting power within the game is a really good way of allowing players of all skills to participate at all levels of your game.
I was going to add, another tool is having optional objectives, allowing players to keep progressing through the game without doing it perfectly or super well. When you think about what star rating does in a game like Angry Birds, you can clear a level, get 1 star, the game is fine and you can keep going. But if you want to go back and prove that you actually know how to do it, the high skill player has more to engage on, and the low skill player has something to work towards. It works the same way with action games or puzzle games or any of that sort. When there are games that the player can opt into that prove their mastery, and you can give different rewards that won't upset your balance for those things. A lot of signifiers, just Angry Birds in a lot of cases is just going to give you a star that says you did a really good job. And that's enough because they've given the bulk of the economy reward out from the lower level so that players are still close enough to each other.
I will add really quickly, when thinking about difficulty in your games, it is massively easier to make things harder than it is to make things easier. So when you ship your game, it should be accessible to players of many different levels. And if people are complaining that it's too easy, you can add on all sorts of crazy difficulty things that go on in the future. But to make the game easier after you've launched it is incredibly difficult, as far as I've seen. So please keep that in mind.
Thank you so much, everyone. I think the next question is about economy, ads economy, right? How do you balance between user who watch a lot of ads and got a lot of rewards versus user who doesn't watch a single ads and hence doesn't get any reward?
Right. So what you're going to want to do is know the limits that a player can actually spend that reward, know how much it can be moved before they make more progression in your game. So when I'm talking about the sinks, a lot of what they can do is start buying options at a given power level that are then going to be obsoleted when they move forward. When you think about what that reward can actually give you, sometimes it might be move towards the next tier faster rather than spending more time at their current power tier acquiring more resources at that specific level. You're also going to want to make sure that these things don't have to be repeatable indefinitely. You can put limits on those things and say, well, you can watch 2 ads and get the reward. I mean, I don't think I've seen a game that said you can watch more ads if you want for no reward, because that's kind of silly. But in general, you can say this is how many you can do here, and this is what is reasonable that I expected you to do.
Do you suggest putting a cap on the amount of rewarded ads a user can watch?
I think when they are specifically transactional, that makes sense. So if there's a point in your game that says you can unlock an extra reroll, do you need to have that happen more than once, or can you still make the game have the players making their decision? When you think about the player experience, if in this reroll situation, if they did it, they got a second reroll, they didn't like the outcome. What is the difference in their experience between I could watch another one and get another reward, or this is what I got? If they can do it indefinitely, they're actually going to, it's kind of a negative experience because they can experience the full depth of the randomness of the system and come out, there's a lot of exit points to that are very unhappy. But if there's a very clear rule, like you get a second chance by participating in the system, then the game is done. And they can say, I've done my shot, that's what it is.
And in the case that you list, the player feels pressure to get the optimal thing, which might mean watching a lot more ads than they actually enjoy or want to, which will then push them to exit.
Right. Think about the experience of, one of the weird things about player psychology is that a player is much better at wanting something than enjoying it after they got it. So it is awesome to make them want stuff, but if as soon as they get it, they feel like the road to have gotten there has been not worth it, it's actually a negative experience for them.
Cái ý này cực kỳ hay nên chắc là mình phải nhấn mạnh lại một chút xíu Brad là rằng là với cái tâm lý của người chơi ấy, thì thực sự đấy là cái chặng đường để mà họ cố gắng giành được một cái gì đấy nó sẽ vui hơn rất là nhiều sau khi mà giành được nó cảm thấy là cái chặng đường đấy nó dễ dàng.
Hạnh phúc là quá trình chứ không phải đích đến.
Nên nếu mà chúng ta để cái trải nghiệm đấy liên tục nó là một cái gì đấy mà họ có thể expect được ấy, thì về lâu dài nó sẽ là một cái trải nghiệm khá là negative với người dùng. Thank you so much, that's very insightful. Câu hỏi tiếp theo là đối với lại những cái game mà competitive đúng không? Thì làm sao mà chúng ta có thể mitigate được cái giải quyết được cái sự chán nản của người chơi mà không làm ảnh hưởng đến cái integrity, tiếng Việt gọi là gì?
So,
Sự thống
there's
nhất.
actually a bunch of great ways to do this. The first thing that I would recommend is to create sort of what we call release valves, right? Create other things for the player to. Am I not getting my mic off this? I think I am. So to create other things for the player to blame. So I don't know if any of you guys have played like Magic the Gathering. It's a collectible card game. Well, you'll very often hear players blame their deck. I got mana screwed. My shuffle was bad. So rather than having to accept all the blame themselves for when they lose, we give them the option to either to blame some other element of the game. And that can mitigate frustration a great deal. The only thing you've got to avoid is if in a team game, you don't want players to say my teammates were terrible and that's why I lost. So that's one aspect. You had
I was just going to expand on it. That's why poker is both one of the highest skilled, highest stakes games in the world, and also a game that can keep pulling in players who are not very good, and they can even enjoy themselves because there's enough luck in it that they can play the game for a long time.
Yes, luck definitely mitigates that. In terms of other things, like if there is continuous progression, even if I lost, I get a little bit of currency, I think I might be able to, next time, if you show me the promise of winning in the future, that helps a great deal towards mitigating some of that frustration.
There are ways to present the information to your players. When you look at it, some games have moved away from presenting, and in a strict competitive shooter, we would always show kill depth ratio, how good you were. And a game like Overwatch Move 2, maybe we don't want to show players that because they're going to judge themselves on that because our characters play so differently. We want different types of skills. Therefore, what we're going to do is show the play of the match, which is a very different promise. It makes one person feel good, it makes the other people feel less bad, and it makes everybody feel like they've contributed more. It has a cost for, it's less appealing to hyper-competitive players, but that wasn't necessarily what they were going for.
Thank you.
Do you have an example of a release valve?
Yeah. So for example, in Magic, people blame, or in Pokemon or anything, people blame their deck. People blame the way they shuffle. They say, oh, it was a bad shuffle, right? We've given them some luck elements. In Call of Duty, we gave, and this was a mistake in some ways, but this is an example of something we did. We gave people the noob tube. We gave this beginning level weapon that would fire grenades, and people sort of grenades spam all over the place. So if you got blown up by one of those, you go, oh, these people are using this low skill weapon. I'm way better than them, but I just got unlucky and they hit me with grenades. And you don't feel bad about losing that way, right? You can still convince yourself that you're good. So any of these sort of things that allow you to continue to believe in your own skill and not feel like, oh, I'm terrible, I lost, I guess I should just quit forever.
But you look at the way that hardcore racing games have had this problem with multiplayer forever. In a racing game, it's you against the track. Once a player gets out in front, it's extremely hard for other players to catch up to them. This is why Mario Kart works so hard at building all the catch-up mechanics. It gives a way for players of different skill levels to play together, but it also gives excuses for the player first to lose sometimes.
Blue shell.
We're dancing around the subject that I talk about a lot because I think it's extremely important, and that is toxicity. And we need to talk about it. We should be talking about this all the time. The problem is, like, when players lose, or even if they win, they find a way to just sort of explode their frustrations or whatever out there. And we don't have a good solution yet. And I wish we did. I wish companies invested more into reducing the amount of toxicity that their players are able to get away with, because we don't want to ban anyone that's buying our products. But this is something to keep in mind, because it's part of the nature of games to lose. We don't win everything, and we need to, as a society of game developers, really start talking about this more and trying new ideas and new things to reduce the amount of toxicity that we have in games. Because it's something that I say a lot when people ask me, what's the worst part about making video games? I generally reply with, the players. Because it's so awful. And like, one of the worst things that can happen as a game developer is I log online and see 10,000 people saying horrible, horrible things about the game that I've just spent hours and hundreds of hours working on, and they want to kill my family, and like all these horrible, horrible things. So we were dancing around this subject of toxicity. I wanted to make sure that it's in everybody's minds. We need to be better about how we handle this as a species, because it's really awful.
Thanks, everyone. I guess the next question for Brad also. Like, is there a concept of like an ideal delta between source and sink?
The gap between.
Yeah.
So, what the first and most important thing, of course, I'm just going to say this again, I said it a million times, is that you need to have more sinks than you have sources, because you're always going to be fighting that battle.
More sync.
One thing that I didn't really touch on was player choice. I was touching on what is the course of a player like purchasing and consuming the things that they need to progress in the game. You're also going to want a lot of options for players to have in a lot of cases, so that players are picking between things because it's an activity that they're doing that makes them feel like they're not railroaded into what you're asking them to do. What that also does, though, is gives them, if a player is spinning in one area, that's a way to absorb and have sinks for the player that is way more engaged, that is spending more. Because you'll see that those players like to kind of have everything. In terms of a rule of thumb, I think it kind of depends on the type of experience you want to build. So some of the more hardcore games, if you guys have seen like Dark Souls, what is really important for the aesthetic that they're building is that the player is very aware that they have less than they would like. The feel of the game is survival. This would be the same if it's a game about surviving in the woods or something like that. You want to always have the player feeling like they're losing just a little bit, even as they're succeeding, which means that your sinks need to be visibly higher all the time in a way that lets the player keep progressing.
And I would just add that the most important thing is that you know as a developer what gap you are trying to maintain, because this allows you to manipulate that gap. How are you going to make your events exciting for your players? Giving them enough resources when you run your seasonal events, when you run your live ops events, giving them that burst of resources which is going to temporarily put them on the other side of that line. And so long as you know where that line is, you can make your big moments in your game, your seasonal events, You do everything about like the end of your battle pass, all these sort of things, exciting for your player by being able to temporarily have them cross that gap and feel like, oh, I finally caught up, I have enough, I can do the thing I want to do.
Như vậy là cái lượng sinh lý tưởng ấy là sinh bao giờ nó cũng phải nhiều hơn là source. Rồi, I know that Brad, you already run over that questions over there, but I want to open it up for Tamir and James. Do you have, quick run through of some of the popular sync for casual games?
I've been talking a lot, I'll let you start.
Sure. I mean, the casual puzzle genre is like what 65% of the entire gaming market. So like, there's not really one or two good examples. What I was thinking of when I was looking at this, and I think I read it incorrectly, I was thinking of a puzzle game, like a game where you're putting together puzzles. And in a game like that, there are no boosts, there are things like that. Maybe there's hints. But something that I've seen that as a sync for people is the ability to use their own images to create these puzzles that they get to put together. And so, maybe I play like a nature scene and a nice little city scene. But if I want to upload a picture of like me and my partner, I can do that and it costs 100 silver. And so I need to play through some of the puzzles to get enough silver so that I can then do this and then I complete the puzzle and then maybe for another 100 silver, I can send her a link so that she can put this puzzle together. Like, it's trying to be clever.
Like activities that you can do on top of your normal play.
Well, this is specifically for a puzzle game, like of putting together the pieces. But yeah, anything that you can do to augment the experience can be ways that can be good things.
So yeah, I was going to jump in with cosmetics, right? If you look at Gardenscapes, Gardenscapes is a great example of this. I have other problems with the game, but they're great at this. Basically, for a lot of these types of games, you have a house you're repairing, right? You can buy paintings and chairs and other things to put in the house. You can personalize it, make it really feel your own. And so while these aren't necessary for the gameplay, they're a great place for the player to be able to pour resources into, right? You can create some sort of meta-cosmetic gameplay that the player can then spend the resources that they earn on. The other aspect that I've seen very powerful is being able to give other people stuff. Now, there's some issues around this in terms of there can be fraud in this, so that's a thing to caution you about, but people love the option of, hey, I will spend 1,000 of my points and get my whole guild a little, like, one extra consumable or something like that. It feels really good to be able to give your friends things, so even if they're really inefficient, people will spend on those types of syncs to give their friends, so long as their friend just gets a little message, hey, username X got me this thing next time they log in, right?
I was going to say, can you give this super quick rundown on what makes cosmetics valuable to players versus not valuable?
Yes, so cosmetics are about expressing yourself, right? If we look around this room, despite the lack of color, each of us made a choice today in what to wear. That choice expresses who we are. In games, you do the same thing. You customize and personalize your game to express yourself. So as long as you give me vectors for that expression, either expression to better embody the role I want within the game, or just to express myself, you will create cosmetics that people want to buy and that people are willing to spend their currency on, and that way you can remove that currency from the game.
I'll be selling this shirt for $100 in the video because people are interested in cosmetics.
Thank you so much. Okay. Mình cứ nghĩ là cái phần economy design đấy mọi người cũng gục giống như mình, nhưng mà có vẻ như mọi người có vẻ rất quan tâm đến nhận rất là nhiều câu hỏi cho Brad. I guess next question for you as well. People who pay and people who do not pay have different amount of resources in the game, right? So when you balance the game, do you prioritize the free or the paid ones?
The answer is both.
The free.
You should be able to plot a player's journey through your game if they're not engaging with a lot of systems or if they're not going to pay for any systems, and plot their journey if they are going to be doing that. At each of those steps, ask yourself, is this person having a good experience? What could I do to make their experience better? And you can also ask yourself, what can I do to convert them? But be careful, we have a tendency to, when we say, what can we do to convert them? We're not thinking about whether that's creating a good experience for them that's going to get them to keep playing rather than just they have to make the choice and a lot of them are just going to leave at that point.
I'm going to add real quick. When working in casual games, there's a few really good key moments that you want to evaluate where players are and as best as possible how they're feeling. Like at the 60-second mark, at the 5-minute mark, and at the 15-minute mark. And obviously you'll lose some people along the way, but especially on that day one, or day zero, I guess as it is, really understanding, are players enjoying it at 30 seconds, at 60 seconds? And it had better be yes. Like you want them to already be like, oh, okay, I get this is fun, you know. And then you'll be able to see over the course of the next 10, 15 minutes where their engagement goes. And so sometimes, if you're lucky enough, you can even start to make these 3 branches, as Brett has been talking about, from those initial markers that you're seeing from player behavior in those first 15 minutes.
Rồi, mình biết là đã hết 30 phút Q&A rồi nhưng mà còn rất là nhiều câu hỏi hay nữa nên chúng ta đi nhanh nha. I think we will have to speed up through the last questions. Okay, where do you learn game design? Where are the hidden resources that developers can check it out?
So I actually went to university and studied programming, which was weird. To be a game designer, you need to, in my personal opinion, you need to have another skill that's not game design. Because game design, I think you said this earlier, game design is a lens. It's a way of looking at things. It's a way of problem solving. So to be a good game designer, you need to have as wide of an experience as possible that you can look at. One of my favorite game designers I ever worked with, he was a game designer only for 2 years. Before that, he was working in import and export of textiles. And we were trying to work on a city economy for a game once, and he said, oh, hey, let me take a crack at that. And just created this whole beautiful system that worked really, really well because he understood things like import taxes and how shipping works and like all of these crazy things that none of us had any experience. So if you want to be a really good game designer, go experience life. Go out and try all sorts of new experiences and have some great times and some crappy times, and that will all influence your ability to really problem solve, which is the crux of what a game designer does.
I think what we're sharing today and this week are a lot of tools and tricks that you can use to break yourself out of your normal thinking, to think of things in a different way and be more creative. But those are just methods that we use to do it. The core of what we're doing is thinking through this from the player's mindset and every day asking ourselves, what is going to make this experience more delightful? I'm not designing for myself, I'm putting myself in the player's shoes. I'm imagining different players and what they're going to do. The cool thing about games is that nobody knows anything and good games can come from anywhere. But what we're doing is we're trying to teach ourselves ways to look at how players will understand our games, ways that we can use to come up with better methods of coming up with the next cool thing.
Thank you so much. To a lot of questions on dynamic difficulty adjustment. Got the best practice?
Oh, for dynamic difficulty adjustment?
Yep.
All I was saying earlier is simply build systems into your game that allow players to sort of grind and get more resources to overcome challenges. Because if you do that, some players will be able to overcome challenges without using a lot of resources because they are skillful at the game. But the other players will still eventually be able to overcome those same challenges because they can grind for those resources.
Okay, now moving to the next questions about source. There are 2 popular ways of designing source in versus game. One, the Candy Crush, where you designer tend to be a little more economical and stingy when giving away resources, and the other one, like Royal Match, where resources giving away plentifully. Why? And what are the good and bad of each options?
So Royal Match, which is also the #1 most revenue generating title that exists right now, the reason they give away the rewards constantly is they want to train you to use them all the time. They want you to think that every time you're playing a match, you should be using them. Then when you find something that's really hard, you're still using all of your resources and then you need to buy more.
Well, and Royal Match is an interesting case because specifically in Royal Match, the penalty for streak breaking, the penalty for actually losing a level is enormous.
Yeah.
Like you get special tools in the game if you won 20 or more levels in a row, and if you won 50 or more levels in a row. And so they want to give you a bunch of resources so you burn through all of those on the hard level, and then maybe a little bit more so you don't break your streak.
Yep.
And that's how they make their income, right?
Yeah.
Versus the Candy Crush method where they just give you too few and then only ask that you use a little, but you just don't have that
Right.
every time you're going down the hard levels.
Nghe như vậy thì thực ra hai cái trường phái này về đến cuối cùng thì nó cũng khá là balance thôi đúng không? Một bên cho nhiều nhưng mà cũng tiêu nhiều mà. Được rồi, cảm ơn. Còn câu hỏi cuối cùng của chúng ta đấy là tỷ lệ income với outcome như thế nào để kinh tế trong game không bị lạm phát hay khó chịu người dùng. Can you share a little bit about inflation management in the game? What's some best practice?
Let me think here. Yeah,
This
you
is a
played
$1 billion
lot of EverQuest, didn't
questions.
you?
I did indeed play a lot of EverQuest. And what's interesting is, like, especially in patches and all those sort of things, you have lots of opportunities to reset your economy by
Or break it.
Yes, well, that too. But even if you break it, you have the option of saying, well, that goal, it's no longer important. Well, the most important economic piece now is, adamantine to make the sword you want.
Right, introducing new content that is going to kind of removes a lot of the old economy and everybody moves up to the next one.
Exactly.
Would it have negative impact on user experience in the game? Would it make them feel,
So what's interesting is, if I bought the best sword in the game, and a new best sword comes out, I'm still going to be one of the first people to get the new best sword because I have the best tools for grinding towards that new thing, right? World of Warcraft to this day is built on this concept, right? Even though they power creep, their audience is not that upset by it because if I've done the work, I get a leg up on everybody else, but everybody else gets a little bit bigger leg up on the economy as a whole, right?
And they eventually had to add all those catch-up mechanics.
Yep.
Because they still wanted new players to come in and be able to catch up to the players who had been getting this far without invalidating their time. So they kind of ease off on the gas of the bonus that you get as you get closer and closer to the end.
One of the things that I've seen a lot is that there's sort of like this mainline progression, and once you finish the mainline progression, you're basically just doing seasonal events and things like that. And all of these seasonal events come with their own currencies. And so, in the main game you may have 10 bajillion gold or whatever, but you've already gotten everything you needed, and so now that currency is basically no longer necessary. But then in each of the different seasonal events, there's a different currency they need to get. And each time that they're releasing a new event, they're testing a new economic model. And sometimes if they release an event that has a really good economic model, they'll then transfer that onto the main game as like a next chapter. And then players start moving through that, as a way of sort of managing the fact that there's just like, if people have been playing for 3 years versus new players, there's just an infinite differential between them.
They can also be really fun as a way to try out game modes.
Yeah.
Your game is really successful and you can have a mode that's a seasonal event, it goes away. You then take your time to collect feedback and then go, hey guys, really exciting news, that game mode that you liked is coming back again.
And you can also have different economies at different points in the game. Like MiHoYo, early on in almost all of their game, there's the free currency. You're a little tight on it, right? You're working to earn it to level up your characters because you have to pay to level up all your characters. But once you've leveled up all your characters, you're going to have infinite of that, and they don't care, right? Because at that level, you're playing a totally different economy and economic game than you were until you got to that point. And they introduce new ways to do that. And so it's okay to have economic elements that are left behind, that become irrelevant, that you do hyperinflate, so long as you as a designer know when it's going to happen and say, okay, I've designed around this to create some other way to play the economy for these players when they pass this.
Compared to World of Warcraft, which never wants to move beyond gold,
Right.
is always dealing with this problem.
Rồi như vậy thì kiểm soát lạm phát nó cũng là cái topic rất là lớn đúng không? Có quá là nhiều công cụ chúng ta không đủ thời gian để đi hết, nhưng mà đấy các bạn nghe cái rồi đấy live ops, rồi sau đó thì introduce những cái nền kinh tế mới khi mà ở những cái giai đoạn tiếp theo ở trong game. Mình cũng có nghe các anh ấy nói về catch up mechanics. I heard the keyword catch-up mechanic several times. I think we have to set up some time in the future to talk about it. It sounds like an important thing to me now. But thank you so much everyone. Mọi người ơi, chúng ta đã hết câu hỏi rồi. Nếu mà các bạn vẫn muốn hỏi tiếp chuyên gia thì mình sẽ giữ các anh ở đây thêm 5 phút nữa. Nhưng mà chương trình của chúng ta ngày hôm nay ở đây nha. Nếu mà các bạn muốn hỏi thêm thì các bạn có thể lên sân khấu để nói chuyện trực tiếp với mọi người. Cảm ơn các bạn rất là nhiều. Ngày mai chúng ta bắt đầu lúc 8.